All right, welcome to Two Sons Podcast. Hope all you guys are having a great week. We're hitting episode 4 of Mr. and Mrs. Smith today, also known as Double Date.
Double Date.
By the way,
it should be called Trainwreck.
Seriously, slow motion train wreck.
Just
no, you know those like when you see like a boat crash into a dock.
Yes,
and like it's literally moving into the dock
like
like
a
this.
Big,
and then you're expecting it to kind of go like dink, and
the guy filming it is like 100 yards away, and he's like, "Oh no, it's gonna crash!
No, it's gonna crash!
It's about to happen, honey! Get all the kids out here! It's about to crash!" And then it crashes.
It always like hits at a really slow speed, but then the explosive like shrapnel,
right, and it just continues to go through. Yeah,
textbook physics too, because it's like force equals mass times acceleration. So even if the acceleration is really small, but the mass is huge,
yes,
the force is like insane.
Dude, how did they think that was a good idea? So let's lay down the plot. So the Mr. and Mrs. Smith that we know meets another Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and the guy is just way too nice. Oh my gosh, we're all Mr. and Mrs. Smith-I?
This is great.
We should have a dinner party at your house. And that's like the first thing that pissed me off. It's just like, how did our Mr. and Mrs. Smith think it was wise to show that Mr. and Mrs. Smith where they live?
Not to mention they had a day off and they went out like shopping and happened to run into these guys.
I know, it's way
at
too
the same
set up.
coffee shop. Like
yes.
Luke had, because Luke watched this episode like 2 weeks before me. And he just goes like, this episode, dude, he's like, it's literally just one bad decision after the other. And then I watched it. That's literally what happened. It's
yes.
Like,
have you ever seen Outer Banks? Because that's
No,
what
I
it is
haven't.
too. Outer Banks is literally
I've seen like one
just a
episode
series of bad decisions made amongst children. And you're like, what the hell are you guys doing? Where are your parents?
So, and it honestly was funny too, because like, I think honestly it shines a light on just how lonely that lifestyle would be.
Oh,
that like
yeah.
the two of them, because like it's kind of like an example of confirmation bias. Like if you're lonely and it's like wishful thinking. If you want something to happen, you're more willing to overlook red flags.
Yes.
And like it honestly got I was really confused because I was wondering where it was going to go south. And when they started talking about how like, oh, we're ultra high risk and you guys are only high risk.
It's like, what?
And then they were like, do you want to try ultra high risk?
And they're like, hell yeah, we
yeah,
want
and
to
they're
try
like,
some.
and it almost felt like they were kind of like bragging against each other.
Right.
Like, I want to do it.
Yeah,
You
I
wanna
would do it if
don't
you do it. Yeah,
I would
I'd
do
be
it.
down.
Yeah,
Dude.
and I thought that was what it was going to end with. I thought they were going to just ask them like, hey, like switch places with us.
Yeah.
We do get that weird moment though, where they talk about how they're going to just work until they make a certain amount of money and then they're going to quit.
And then they get laughed at.
They don't just laugh; they like lose it,
Right?
Like in tears, laughing,
right? So we learned a little bit about the company. Yeah. So obviously they've got a lot of people working for them. Number one. Number two, the low risk people are like the gardeners. It seems like, and like the maids is what it sounds.
That was the way you interpreted that.
Yeah, because they mentioned something like, oh, like the guy that always drops off the packages, like, oh, he's low risk or something like that. I can't remember because it was 2 weeks ago that I watched it, Jay. Anyways. But we learned about like the hierarchy of the company.
Yeah, we learned a little bit about the hierarchy of the company. We learned the other Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they had been doing it, 5 or 6 years?
I think so. And they both had previous partners.
Yes. And then they
Yes.
straight up said, like, one of our missions, we had to kill another Mr. and
Dude,
Mrs.
I
Smith.
know.
Did you catch that part?
I know, and that's when I'm just like, that's why you shouldn't tell them where you live, you idiots.
Yeah, that whole thing was intense. And so then they get drunk, and then they're like, oh shit, we got to work tonight.
Yeah.
And then
Oh yeah, it's 10 o'clock. Yeah, we gotta get going.
Our Mr. and Mrs. Smith are like, what? And then they're like, you guys should come with. And then of course they have this moment where they look at each other and none of them wants to be the coward who says no. You can tell they both kind of think it's a bad idea, but they're just kind of getting wrapped up into it.
Right.
And then they basically just get like shuttled into a helicopter and then they
holding
close the
these
door
bags
behind them.
of like iPhones or something like that. And then they went to somewhere tropical.
Yes, they
in
went
a
to somewhere
very
tropical.
long helicopter flight.
Yes.
Which apparently that helicopter has great range.
Yes.
Incredible.
Some
range.
body of water somewhere. Honestly, like I thought that scene was kind of funny.
Yes. It was filmed really interestingly.
Because like they basically show up and get abducted and start getting beat, and then they fight their way out with machetes and get back to the helicopter and get out. And the other thing that we kind of are safely, I think we can interpret as like, it almost seemed like they got their butts kicked because they weren't the right people. Like that was something that kind of stood out to me. So it was very clear to me too that like I think the other two didn't want to go on that particular
just because they knew it was sketch.
Because or maybe there was some specific relationship between the guy they killed who was in charge. Remember? Because remember, like at one point he looks over at his wife and is like, "They killed the so-and-so."
They killed the guy. Yeah.
They're like, "They killed the so-and-so."
And he's like, "Is that going to be a problem?" He's like, "Nah, it shouldn't be a problem for us."
And then the girl in the background's like, honey, we really shouldn't work with others anymore. You're like,
yeah,
you think this was you? You manipulated this whole damn situation. I interpreted that as like they specifically didn't want to go on this mission.
Yeah, I think they knew it was too sketchy, so then they did some recon on other Mr. and Mrs. Smiths and had them do it.
Or the alternative there is like I did kind of pick up major like the other Mr. and Mrs. Smith were putting off these vibes like that they don't want to do what they do anymore, but they have to.
Oh, I see.
And so I think some of it could kind of just center around them being trapped. I think I am curious to see where that all ends up, but I do think this inevitably ends with them, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, our Mr. and Mrs. Smith going against the company, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I think if it happens in this season, or I don't know if there's another season coming out, I don't know, but I totally agree. I think they are going to try and get out at some point. What was really interesting to me is we got to see the Venmo that they got after the.
Oh yeah, $350K.
I think it's like 350 or 375.
Yeah, and presumably
or
that's
like that.
half.
Dude, I know.
So yeah, they make $700K for this drop off.
I know. That's what I was going to ask you, because the other Mr. and Mrs. Smith act like they sent all of it. Right. I think they like act like they're like, oh yeah, they should get the the wages.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
She said that. She goes, we should give them all. And then I think the guy disagreed, or he was like, really? Okay.
But either that was all of it or a portion of it. But we kind of see the money that's being
the
thrown
sheer
around.
amount of money.
Yeah. For these. Now, would you
and I would have to work years and years to make that much money, and they made it in one day.
Yes. Hey, unless Two Sons just gets popped in.
We're looking for some sponsors. How about Signature Select seltzer water?
Any form of coffee.
So I did think it was funny though how they, like, as they were hacking with machetes, they skipped ahead to them just being in the helicopter, just like
spent,
disheveled, just like holy shit,
covered in blood.
But honestly, we get this really funny scene at the end, which I think one of the things that I appreciate about both of these actors is they do a good job of capturing, like, to me, the authentic nature of a relationship in the sense that, like, they kind of have this really free-flowing, like, vulnerable type of conversation when they're back home.
Yeah.
Where, like, they start joking about how they're like, those people sucked, man.
Right.
Like, and they're joking and shit. But, like, what I appreciated about that conversation is, like, neither of them was trying to act stoic. Neither of them was trying to put forward a facade.
That sucked.
They were both just, like, in their purest form of, like, just they're hanging out. And it gave me very much, like, two best friends after something happened, like, talking about what happened.
For sure.
Which I think, to me, is a fundamental part of a relationship. Like, to me, like, screw anything else. Like, if your wife or your spouse is not your friend, like your best friend, like if you can't be trapped in an elevator with them for 12 hours, then like
man, isn't that the truth?
You're not going to be in good shape. And so, like, like I thought, like, honestly, I do, after 5 episodes or 4 episodes now.
Yeah, 4.
I feel pretty strongly that, like, this is more of a relationship show.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, dude, like I said, man, this is just a sick way for the company to hook people up.
Anything else on this episode?
No, I completely agree with what you said about the relationship, though. And I completely agree with what you said, not to get too in depth, because that's not why people come to the show, but, like, I agree, man. Like, your life partner has to be someone that you could be stuck in an elevator with for 12 hours, for sure.
Or to put it more simply, like, the person that when something happens in your life is the person you immediately want to talk to and tell about. You know what
I mean? When you're having a really hard time, like if you're suffering from something, it's the person that you can feel comfortable talking with. Dude, it blows my mind. Like, I see it a lot, actually, where I see like partners come in with their partner for like a health visit of some sort, and you can just see that one of the partners just has the life sucked out of them, and they're there just because that there's like the spouse or husband or whoever is just an a-hole, and it's easier for them to be sucked into their crappy day and just to ride along and just to sit in and shut up. Dude, I see it all the time, and it makes me so sad when I leave the room. Like, my soul, like,
Oh no,
Like,
it bums me
dude,
out too
it's
when I see that
weird.
kind of thing.
It's such a bummer, man.
It's funny, when I was young, I used to, like any other stupid young kid, be focused on, when it came to the relationship, like the more romantic stuff, like all of the
I got you a giant teddy bear for Christmas that weighs 75 pounds and takes up an entire corner of our living room. You like that?
Well, in like even just extending to I remember this about just in terms of like the weekly flow when you were a young person. You're always focused on like, what am I doing Friday night? What am I doing Saturday night? Like what's going on this weekend? And it was even like that in relationships, in the sense that like you're always focused on these like big moments and these big kind of like like chemistry, electricity type of things. And don't get me wrong, my wife and I are obviously super attracted to each other, and we have that chemistry too.
Right.
But like by far the best thing about my marriage is like we are best friends. We just love to hang out.
Amen.
And
man.
like it is, again, it's like, to put it simply, it's more about Sunday night through Thursday night and like those 5 out of the 7 days a week that are boring, and how those are,
dude,
than the others.
I know. And you and I are starting to just get a little bit older, like being out of our 20s, like things change, man. Like you're right. Like what's a good time to me is like hanging out with Elena. Like, and what's cool about our schedule is we don't do the 9 to 5, right? So like her and I will have a random Wednesday off.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite days, dude.
Just do
like,
shit all day.
Yeah, like HF Coors dates. So no one knows what HF Coors is. It's like it's
Pottery
like
company?
It's not a quick pottery, but they make like dinnerware.
Yeah.
Like, but not like forks and knives. Like they make plates and bowls and stuff.
But
and
like the fancy shit you see at restaurants.
like really fancy ones. And like what's cool is they have like their blemished ones, right? And they keep them outside of their store, and you can just buy them for like a quarter of the price, and they've got like little scratches and stuff. But like we love them. But like
yeah, we have a set of HF Coors blemishes.
they're incredible.
As well,
Yeah, they're incredible. And literally like I got excited because I was like, oh, we're gonna go to HF Coors and pick out some plates. And like that's not like being domestic husband. Like that's just what that is like just enjoying life moments with your spouse and not needing something big like a huge rave to go to on a Friday night or something like that.
Or
like,
needing drama, or needing like that's the point, is like if you can be bored with your spouse, then you won't be bored.
Meaning get excited about the day-to-day stuff. Like I'm stoked because Graham has his 1 year well visit with his pediatrician on like Thursday or something like that. And like Elena and I are like, oh, we're like so excited. Like we're going to make it a thing. Like we're going to go to the visit and like maybe grab some lunch afterwards. Like,
no, that's awesome.
Dude, it's nice. Like you and I are super blessed. Like you and I hit the utmost jackpot. Why can't I say jackpot? Lottery? Just repeat.
We hit the utmost jack. I mean, jackpot.
There's so many jokes I'm just not going to say right now.
We did hit the jackpot. Like it's
like,
so funny.
Lucky,
I was actually talking
blessed.
about this with Carly the other night, like, because like when I think about like being a parent and the things that I want to instill in my children, like I think at least to this point, at 32 years old, if I had to hammer 1 point home to my kid, the 1 point would be pick the right spouse. I think that's literally
great advice.
I think it matters more than your career.
Pick someone
I think
normal.
it matters more than any other factors that go on in your life. Like I think it's literally, I think making a bad decision on that front it can ruin your life. And I think making the best decision on that front can actually help you survive the shittier parts of life.
100%.
Because like again, when life sucks, that's the one person you have to lean on.
100%.
It's crazy. So shout out to Carly and Elena. They're pretty great. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate you for supporting
How did
the
we
show.
start talking about
Eventually, we'll find some time to get to episode 5 of Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Maybe
we'll see
one
you guys
day.
then.
We'll see.